I will now move on to the next part of the program, which is Keynote Talk. It's my pleasure to introduce Lieutenant General Charles Moore. He's the Deputy Commander of the U.S. Cyber Command at Fort George Meade at Maryland. The U.S. Cybercom directs, synchronizes, and coordinates cyberspace planning and operations to defend and advance national interests in collaboration with domestic and international partners. General Moore was commissioned in 1989 after graduating from the U.S. Air Force Academy. He has served as an F-16 fighter pilot, an instructor pilot, weapons officer, forward air controller, and instructor at the U.S. Air Force Fighter Weapons School at Nellis Air Force Base in Nevada. His command experience includes the 555th Fighter Squadron at Aviano Air Base in Italy, the 332nd Expeditionary Operations Group at Ballard Air Force in Iraq, the 20th Fighter Wing at Shaw Air Force Base, South Carolina, and the 57th Wing at Nellis Air Force Base in Nevada. Prior to this position, General Moore served as the Director of Operations for the U.S. Cyber Command. General Moore is a command pilot with more than 3,000 hours in the F-16 and more than 640 hours of combat time. So it's a pleasure and honor to have him speak here.
Well, good morning. It's fantastic to be here with all of you in beautiful Miami, and to get out of the national capital region for a couple of days is always a benefit in my mind. But I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with all of you. Now, if you were listening to that kind introduction, you're probably wondering, what in the world is an Air Force fighter pilot doing as the Deputy Commander of U.S. Cyber Command? I see some heads nodding out there in the audience. And that is a very fair question, and it's a question I often ask myself, to be honest with you. In fact, if I went back prior to about 2014, I don't know that I could spell cyber if you spotted me the C and the Y. But since that time, the department has seen to it that they've given me a lot of education and positions and jobs that have allowed me to contribute in this space and learn about this space. And I'd like to think help us learn how to organize, train, equip, plan, and execute cyber operations to help defend our nation. In fact, I will tell you that what I have learned is that there are many aspects of the cyber domain that make it quite unique, as all of you are very well aware. But the basic historical, tried and tested principles of war and warfighting, they still hold true in cyberspace, just like they do in air, land, sea, and space itself. That said, I have come to believe that we cannot achieve success in the traditional domains of warfare that I just mentioned, air, land, maritime, space, without achieving dominance in the cyber domain. To take that a step further, I would offer that at the strategic level, in the 21st century and moving forward, the information lever of national power will supersede those of diplomacy, economic, and military power, because it enables and facilitates their successes. Within the Department of Defense, in order to achieve the level of cyber and information dominance necessary for our success, we must operate at a comprehensive global view and understanding, and at a frequency and agility simply not capable by human beings alone. So this is where AI comes into play. We need it to help us operate at scale, with speed, and over time, with a level of sense-making that continues to evolve. In that vein, this morning I want to talk about U.S. Cyber Command, our missions, and how we are planning to use artificial intelligence in the execution of those responsibilities. Finally, I will touch on the future and the comprehensive approach I believe we must embrace if we hope to remain the dominant military power in the 21st century. And yes, AI will be absolutely critical to that endeavor. First, a little bit about U.S. Cyber Command. In May of 2018, U.S. Cybercom was stood up as the 10th United States Combatant Command, otherwise known as a COCOM. This is an organization within the United States Department of Defense that is composed of units from 2 or more services, so Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, that conducts a broad and continuing mission. Now, in the case of U.S. Cyber Command, we are tasked by the President of the United States to perform 3 specific missions. Number 1, to defend the DoDIN, or the Department of Defense Information Network. Number 2, to defend the nation from significant cyber attack. And 3, to provide and conduct offensive cyber warfighting operations in support of department objectives. So let's begin by discussing defense of the DoDN. The United States Department of Defense Information Network is defined as the set of information capabilities and associated processes for collecting, processing, storing, disseminating, managing information on demand to warfighters, policymakers, and support personnel. It includes our unclassified and our classified networks. It is made up of over 3 million global users, over 40,000 unique circuits, 15,000 specific networks, and 4 million computers. At any given day, we will block over 300 million actions at our internet access points. So as many of you here can relate to, we are engaged with potential adversaries or those that wish to do us harm, our networks harm, on a persistent daily basis. To defend ourselves, we execute a persistent campaign to secure, operate, and defend the DoDN. Considering the magnitude of our potential attack surface and the interest that it obviously attracts, it'll come as no surprise that we are continuously looking for ways to improve capabilities and tools like AI to improve our defenses so that we can continue to operate on the department's networks at the speed and with the agility that's absolutely necessary to execute our military operations. Now, there are many aspects, obviously, to defending our network or the DoDN, and we could spend the entire session here today talking about zero trust architecture, the development of quantum-resistant encryption, our cross-domain solutions, or even how to solve the never-ending problem of basic cyber hygiene. I'm actually going to depart from my prepared remarks for a second because I was going over my remarks before I left home, and my wife asked to see them, and she got to this point of my prepared remarks, and she started laughing, and I was like, "What? That's not good. What's so funny?" And she goes, "You're really going to talk about basic cyber hygiene?" And I'm like, "Yeah, of course. That's really, really important." And she goes, "Are you sure you're the best person to do that?" And I'm, "What do you mean?" And she reminded me that, and this is pretty embarrassing for the Deputy Commander of U.S. Cyber Command, but I'm going to share it with you anyway. So a few months ago, my 8-year-old daughter started coming to me and asking me a lot of interesting questions. You know, "Dad, remind me how old you are again. You're an old guy. How old are you? So what year were you born? And how much older are you than Mom? And what year did you guys meet?" And these series of questions. And of course, looking back in hindsight, she was always asking me these questions over the course of several days, right when I was in the middle of something, a home project or doing something for work. I was very busy, not thinking about, really what was going on. And you fast forward a couple weeks later, and one evening my wife noticed that my daughter had been online and on her iPad for a pretty lengthy period of time, without a doubt beyond the allotted time that we allow them to spend at any given time, and that we set up with our parental control system. Any of you that are parents of younger kids can relate to this. And when she confronted her about it, "Hey, haven't you exceeded your allotted time?" Of course, she insisted that she hadn't, but my wife persisted, and eventually she brought my 11-year-old son into the room, and he quickly folded under the mom pressure and admitted that his sister had figured out our parental controls password by interrogating Dad. And that allowed her to then increase her allotted time online. And then he professed that she had offered to do the same thing for him if he would give her half of his Halloween candy. And I wasn't sure whether to be really, really proud or really, really concerned about this episode, but I think she might have a future as an intern at the National Security Agency or U.S. Cyber Command. And I only share this story to tell you that, got to practice what we preach. And the fact is that basic cyber hygiene, I will just tell you, continues to be the vast majority, the source of the vast majority of our cybersecurity problems inside the department. But in keeping with the emphasis of the symposium, let me get back to describing how we are very focused on using AI in 2 big ways as it relates to protecting the DoDN. First, from a more traditional cybersecurity and cyber defense standpoint, we want to use AI to rapidly identify and deploy counters and patches to deal with adversary signatures indications of compromise, and of course, malware, across the totality of the network. And we simply can't succeed in an environment where any aspect of these operations is conducted in a manual manner. Second, we're embracing artificial intelligence capabilities to help us begin to define what normal behavior looks like across the DoD. This will allow us to further use AI to recognize threats based on behavioral changes, determine the best mitigation efforts, and implement those efforts at speed, scale, and with a level of effectiveness simply unachievable by humans sitting alone at keyboards. In fact, we do believe we can use these same systems to help us anticipate and predict what future adversarial behaviors may look like, allowing us to posture ourselves to be proactive instead of reactive, and opening the door for a range of potential offensive operations that I will touch on later. The second U.S. Cybercom mission that I mentioned deals with our responsibility to defend the nation against significant cyber attacks. And at U.S. Cyber Command, we often refer to the domain as the ultimate team sport. The reason is as simple as it is obvious. Virtually everybody, from the individual person all the way up to nation states, and everybody and anything in between, has equities in this domain. And if you truly want to be successful in your defensive capabilities and your defense, you have to capitalize on partnerships. This is definitely the case when we talk about our Defend the Nation mission. As I'm sure many of you are aware, Cybercom does not have standing authority to operate within the United States. That's left to our friends at the Department of Homeland Security and CISA and the Department of Justice and the FBI. Instead, at Cyber Command, we are focused on our adversaries and their networks, what is otherwise known as red space. In that regard, our emphasis is simple. We find the red archers, and we want to take them out before they can fire their arrows back at the homeland. Now, in the execution of that mission, we often discover information that, via our analysis, ultimately leads to adversary infrastructure that exists within the United States. For example, clandestinely acquired social media accounts that violate terms of service that are being used to covertly attempt to influence and divide Americans around a host of social or economic issues. In that case, we share that information with our teammates at the FBI, who can engage with the social media companies and attempt to disable those accounts. Now, that's just a simple example of the type of teamwork that is absolutely required for us to defend our nation. And yet today, the majority of those interactions with our interagency partners is done manually. My first F-16 instructor pilot used to always tell me, in air combat, speed is life. And in this case and in this domain, I will tell you it is absolutely the same, if not more so. And let me be clear, simple automation is not going to be enough. We're working very hard on ways to use AI to recognize what is important, augment our collection, analyze, and share this data and information at the speed and scale of relevance to any of our pertinent partners. Now, our teammates in these endeavors are not limited to the U.S. government and the interagency. At the National Security Agency and U.S. Cyber Command, we persistently share cybersecurity information with private industry through three primary constructs. First, we execute what we call hunt-forward operations. During hunt-forward operations, we deploy teams of cyber warriors to allied and partner nations to work directly with them on their networks, where we're able to garner significant intelligence insights into our adversaries' methods, capabilities, and tactics. The insights that we gain during these operations, and sometimes the specific cyber tools and weapons our adversaries plan to use, are shared across our government and with our international partners and allies, as well as with private industry. When it comes to the latter, we routinely share this information with the global cybersecurity enterprise using publicly available malware sharing databases and other collaborative platforms. The other two conduits we routinely utilize to share information are the NSA's Cybersecurity Collaboration Center and Cybercom's Under Advisement Program. Both of these constructs have been used to successfully share information that private industry has utilized to protect itself from potential compromises and attacks. Likewise, the information shared with Cyber Command from these entities has enabled us to better protect our military operations, allow our international allies and partners to do the same, and allow us to use our significant analytic capabilities to attribute malicious activity, recommend immediate mitigations, and contribute to long-term solutions. However, like the information gathered during the Hunt Forward operations that I previously mentioned, many of these great data sharing operations are largely manually executed. The need to utilize AI in these endeavors is self-evident. Increasing their speed and scale are absolutely critical and have our full attention. Cybercom's third mission is really focused on the conduct of offensive cyber operations. As with all warfighting domains, the best cyber defense is actually a good cyber offense. I would harken back to the analogy I presented earlier about taking out the archers so that we don't have to dodge arrows. In accordance with the 2018 Department of Defense cyber strategy, Cybercom defends forward by persistently engaging our adversaries, remaining in constant contact, looking for their plans, tools, weapons, infrastructure, all of it, that may be used to attack the United States. And when found, Cybercom postures itself to take actions to eliminate the threat. Additionally, should we find ourselves in actual conflict, Cybercom stands ready to execute cyberspace operations against an array of military targets to help us accomplish our military objectives. The actual execution of many aspects of these operations can significantly benefit from the use of artificial intelligence versus the countless human on-keyboard hours currently required. It's not hard to imagine the benefit of using AI to develop initial access, map an adversary network, detect vulnerabilities, determine which open source or exquisite tool can best be utilized, and to do it with speed, persistence, and precision. Simultaneously and in parallel, these systems can identify and develop separate access opportunities, identify new adversary tools and weapons, begin the analytics to determine mitigations and patches, share that information with our partners, as I previously talked about, and confirm that the fixes have been applied across the totality of our network. Advancing to this construct will allow us to overcome an operational and organizational challenge that exists today. Presently, many cyberspace operations are executed in much the same way the game of American football is played. When you're on offense, you run your offense out on the field. And when you don't have the ball, you run your defense out onto the field. Where we desire to go, and what AI will help us to achieve, is to conduct our operations much more like a mixed martial artist or an MMA fighter. And for those of you who may be unfamiliar, think of a boxer. An MMA fighter or a boxer does not make conscious decisions about being on offense and then being on defense. Instead, the successful ones, we see a seamless approach where actions that may be considered more offense or defense in nature are executed in an inherently synchronized, integrated, and simultaneous manner. In my opinion, this approach is not optional. It is absolutely necessary to operate and counter the artificial intelligence-driven defensive actions our adversaries are starting to embrace. Now, the importance of this kind of integration and synchronization goes beyond just the cyber domain. In the near future, the department will release its national defense strategy. We fully expect that strategy to promote the concept of integrated deterrence. Integrated deterrence promotes the concept that the best way to deter crisis or conflict and to prevail, should we actually find ourselves in a conflict, is to integrate and synchronize all of our military capabilities across all warfighting domains, air, land, sea, space, and cyberspace, and to do it with our friends and allies. So the obvious question is, how do you accomplish this? Well, first we have to recognize some of the realities of today's environment. And the reality is that virtually everything we use to sense or see the environment in all domains, to gather the data, to transfer the data, to store the data, to analyze the data, and to turn that data into information that decision makers can use to direct those fully integrated operations, occurs within the digital domain. This digital convergence inherently relies on networking in order to be effective, obviously. This reality essentially continues to extend the DoDIN, the Department of Defense Information Network, and expand the necessity of the seamless AI-driven offense and defensive operations that I mentioned previously. In order to execute these types of operations, the department must be able to see itself, see the adversary, and the entire battle space. We also must have the ability to command and control our forces. In order to accomplish this goal, the department is developing what is known as JADC2. Raise your hand if you've heard of JADC2. Okay, I've got like one hand. Aaron in the back. Great. Or Joint All-Domain Command and Control. And what's important about JADC2 is it enables the concept of integrated deterrence to actually be executed and its benefits to be realized. I was recently participating on a panel discussion when the subject of JADC2 came up, and one of the points that I made that Joint All-Domain Command and Control will take the flexibility, the agility, the effectiveness, and speed of our military operations to the highest levels imaginable. And this will enable, if we do it right, the seamless, fully integrated, and synchronized conduct of operations across all domains, including cyberspace. However, I also theorize that if you wrote this as an equation, and I realize I'm talking to a lot of technical people, and I'm not one, but I said if you wrote this as an equation, for every unit of increase in the positive attributes that JADC2 will enable, we will also see an increase in the units of potential cyber vulnerabilities squared, and that may be a low number. I went on to make the off-the-cuff comment that maybe I will call that Charlie Moore's law, and that seemed to be the only thing that the media picked up on during that panel discussion. Now, regardless of the actual magnitude, the fact remains that the successful implementation of integrated deterrence will require a level of cybersecurity and defense far beyond what we can accomplish without the use of artificial intelligence. We must utilize it to realize the speed, scale, security, defense, and offense necessary to be successful. Finally, I want to touch on the more strategic level and the role that AI must play going forward if we are to maintain our military superiority, deter conflict, and prevail should an actual war occur. We all understand that we're living in a time where data has become a resource and a commodity. From a military perspective, I would offer that data is the ammunition, information is the weapon, and influencing behavioral change is the ultimate effect. Now, staying focused on the military lever of national power, the one in which I'm in a much better position to expand upon, and based on the realities of digital convergence that I mentioned previously, I'm convinced that a strategy focused on information superiority is required to ensure our long-term success. Let me also say up front that a successful execution of such a strategy will require AI and the sense-making that we expect it to deliver. If we consider China, regarded as the department's pacing challenge, we know they have the intention to continue to build their military capacity in all domains to close the gaps that exist between the United States and our friends and allies. Simultaneously, they continue to execute an aggressive approach to intellectual property theft, largely through the cyber domain, to close the qualitative gaps. This has led some to question the long-term plan of using our traditional approach to power projection, deterrence, and should it come to it, combat operations. As you might imagine, the U.S. Department of Defense collects a significant amount of data about any and all potential adversaries, and we do it every day, 24/7, 365 days a year. Making use of that data, using AI, to better predict an adversary's next move is critical. In military parlance, we refer to that as I&W, or indications and warnings. But using AI to influence our adversaries' perceptions and ultimately their behaviors is game-changing. And again, let me be clear, only artificial intelligence makes this possible because in order to really be effective, it must be executed across all military operations, actions, investments, across the spectrum of conflict from competition to, should it come to it, war, across all levels of operations from tactical to strategic, taking into consideration the changing global environment on a persistent, continuous basis with speed and precision. If that sounds like an impossible task, it is for human beings alone. At the most basic level, imagine its execution through the lens of the construct made famous by Air Force fighter pilot John Boyd, the Ooda Loop. How many people have obviously heard of the Ooda Loop? Observe, orient, decide, and act. AI can provide us insights and recommendations into the actions we should take in order to affect what our adversaries observe and how they orient themselves. This allows us to affect their perceptions, decisions, and ultimately their actions. Once our adversaries are reacting to the created reality that we desire, and this OODA loop is executed at speed holistically over time, which can only be accomplished using AI, you can dominate your adversaries. And by that, I mean deter aggression and conflict, but be postured to succeed should actual hostilities arise. That's the type of success true AI sense-making can make a reality. And I can think of no more important endeavor than to use it to protect our nation, our people, and our way of life. To sum up, let me say that today at U.S. Cyber Command, we are focused on embracing artificial intelligence in ways that allow our mission to be executed at a speed and a scale absolutely necessary for success. We are also counting on the eventual fulfillment of true AI sense-making that will allow us to gain information superiority, a level of superiority that will transform the way we compete, deter conflict, and if, God forbid, a conflict occurs, dominate those who wish our nation, friends, and allies harm. Thank you again for inviting me to be here today, for your warm welcome, your attention, and for what so many of you are doing to use these advanced technologies to improve the lives of so many people. Thank you very much.
Thank you, General Moore. Great talk. We have some time for questions. I'll start off with one. What's your date of birth?
Yeah. Ask my daughter.
I have a.
You have mine.
So I just want to introduce, before we start the questions, I want to introduce Professor Shankar Shastri, who's the co-director from Berkeley of the Digital Transformation Institute. Maybe Shankar can start off with a question.
General, it's a real privilege to listen to you, and it's great to have Cyber Command represented here.
Thank you.
I want to let the audience really ask the questions, but just to kick it off, this research community, I think, really understands how pressing every single topic that you talked about is. So if you could sort of give us a call to action, what should the research community do in support of NSA, in support of Cyber Command, and in support of CISA, which is relatively new? And so a little bit sort of marching orders. And I'll just sort of give you a few things. I mean, certainly you spoke about attribution and Red Archer. I loved the Red Archer analogy. The other thing you spoke about was about dynamic coalitions and sharing information at the speed across coalitions that are changing. But if you can tell us, when you're sitting at the agency, what do you wish the universities of America could do for you?
Yeah, appreciate the question. I was mentioning earlier that on the National Security Agency side, they've had a long-standing tradition with academic institutions and research institutions, et cetera. And on the cybercom side, we're just starting to mature that effort. We've stood up what's known as the Academic Engagement Committee and organization. I think we're up to 90-something academic institutions. And so if you're a member of one of those and you don't know if you're part of that, that would be the first thing. So I'd ask that we make sure that we're in contact with your organization, when you get involved. And on the cybercom side, we're really focused on those three mission areas and all the innovative types of technologies and innovative approaches that can help us succeed in the execution of those missions. But I do know that getting down into specifics, I have a whole lot of really good data scientists, on-net operators, tool developers, et cetera, that are already developing list of topic areas for research, and we'll be happy to share that with folks as they become part of that network that I talked about. As far to your second point, I think you were talking about, without a doubt, as I said in my comments, we say this routinely, this is the ultimate team sport, and those aren't just words. This is much different domain than air, land, sea from a military perspective. We can't be successful without a team approach. And I mean that across the whole of nation, not the whole of government, and not just the whole of nation, with our friends and allies as well. We have to be able to share relevant information. We have to be able to talk about what we're seeing. We have to be able to get to the point where we can share our tools and capabilities. I think if we're going to succeed. I think if we don't, we won't.
I promised to shut up, but your colleague, General Cardone,
yes,
was at our steering committee meeting yesterday. And I just, let me paraphrase what he said. I think there's a fantastic relationship between every university in this coalition and R2 and the research part of NSA. And I think that pipeline is great. But what General Cardone said was, you guys are doing tech push. You guys are developing individual solutions.
right.
And he challenged us. He said, your institute's called Digital Transformation of Systems. And everything you said, even the anecdote with your 8-year-old daughter, I can relate to, I got an 8-year-old daughter too, he said, we got to think about the system. And so I think in the academic community, if we could think of ourselves as somewhat remiss, it's really about doing a little more than tech push, but really the integration into systems.
Yes.
And then having really the operators, which is where I think Cybercom and CISA, as you correctly pointed out, and how do we have a dialogue? And there, of course, the issues of classification, there's lots of issues, but somehow if the academic community could look at systems, and you set up the kind of pipeline that the R2, or maybe it's still R2, I don't know. So your thoughts on that? So General Cardone gave this thing. You were in the room, I think, for part of that.
Yes, sir.
But I think he really lit a fire under the two of us. So if you tell us about how we could engage on those systems, that'd be good. And I promise to stop it.
Yeah. So agree with 100% what you said. And so it's really how do we go about doing that and forming that partnership and actually doing it on a day-to-day basis. The first thing that comes to my mind is we have a facility called Dreamport, if no one's heard of that, where we actually invite academic institutions. We provide private industry to come in an unclassified form. It's just up the road from Fort Meade, and solve some of our most pressing issues. And it's exactly the type of environment you would think. Very collaborative, very open about the problems that we're facing and what we need to do. And this has produced a lot of great results for us, and I think results that have then fed back into private industry as well. So if you're not involved with that, again, that's exactly where I would start.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Are there any questions from the audience? Yeah, go ahead, Edla. Yeah.
As the industry representative for Shell USA, in technology as well in operations, we conduct regular calibration exercises. Where do we stand with respect to our competitors? I'm sure you do the same thing in your domain. Can you disclose a few things that you would feel comfortable saying? Where does the US cyber defense, technology-wise as well as operationally, stand with respect to the competition?
To exercising?
Yes.
You're talking about exercising? Yes. So we have a variety of ways in which we exercise with all those relevant partners that we talked about. In the flying domain, you may have heard of exercise Red Flag, which is where we conduct massive air training exercises against adversarial air presentations, and as well as surface threats, and we bring in allied nations. We've replicated that in the cyber domain. It's called Cyber Flag, uncreative enough. But because everybody understood what we did in the air domain with Red Flag, calling it Cyber Flag, especially our allied partners understood exactly what it is we're trying to do. We bring in cyber operators from our allied partners, as well as people from the whole of government and sometimes industry, present them with a tactical level to operational level problem, and then they usually spend 1 to 2 weeks fighting it out in the domain. And the really important part about how we exercise and what we've learned is it's not good enough just to come up with a plan, brief a plan, go into an environment, exercise your operation, and say, this didn't work out, but this did. Great, we'll do more of that and less of that. We really spend a lot of time, more time debriefing, if you will, what occurred than we do prepping or even executing. Because you have to peel back every layer to get back to core fundamental causes of things that cause something to go wrong, and core what we call lessons learned. And if you don't do that, you wind up going off in many different directions that aren't beneficial. And so we spend a lot of time in those types of exercises. Red flag or cyber flag, just one example. Teaching individuals to actually approach problems that way, and then applying those actual lessons to our real-world operations. Hopefully that answers your question, or at least partially addresses it. But exercise is important. Another thing that I'll mention is one big portion of what we call JICWA, Joint Cyber Warfighting Architecture, which is all the pieces and parts that are coming together to form our warfighting defense and offensive capabilities at Cyber Command, is called the Persistent Cyber Training Environment, PCTE. So it's a persistent environment where we can very quickly replicate potential adversary networks. We can conduct day-to-day certifications and training, all the way up to large-scale exercises like the one that I just mentioned.
So, Dean Bashir, a question?
Yes, I can introduce myself. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for being here. My name is Rashid. Did you introduce yourself?
Yeah. My name is Detlef Hol from Shell. I'm their chief scientist for computational and data science.
Great, thank you.
Good morning.
Nice
My
to
name
meet
is
you
Rashid
again.
Bashir. Nice to see you again. Thank you for being here. My name is Rashid Bashir. I'm the Dean of the Granger College of Engineering at the University of Illinois. Can you comment on the state of workforce in this space from your vantage point? We know there's a shortage. There's a big shortage of STEM and cyber and CS and computing, broadly speaking. But in this particular space and from your vantage point, where are we on a scale of 1 to 10 for the DoD current expertise and state of sort of workforce, and then the future? Like, what can you comment on the impending demand and need, and what can we do towards meeting that goal?
Great question. You're going to make me grade us ourselves, huh? Okay, there's many aspects to that I would offer. First, so the command, we just stood up the command in 2018 as a combatant command level. And as I was saying to someone earlier today, it's the overused analogy, but it's very applicable here. We've been flying this plane while we're building the plane, while we're adjusting the plans of the plane, but because we have no choice. But over the course of those last couple of years, we've spent a lot of time really trying to see ourselves in many ways, but especially as it relates to our workforce. And I think within the last 6 months or so, I would give us about an 8+ on we actually now can see our workforce, civilian, contractor, and uniform wearer, understand where we're putting people, how long they're in positions, where they're moving after a certain period of time. Are they retiring? Are they leaving to take another job? Are they moving somewhere else in the DoD enterprise? And so now I think that's about where we are, which is good. You got to recognize the problem before you can do something about the problem. Accessions, so bringing people into the force, isn't really our problem. I'm very happy to tell you that we have a lot of very motivated, talented, professional, patriotic individuals that want to come and serve their country. They want to do it in the cyber domain. They want to do some things that might get them thrown in jail out in the private industry, but they can do it in the service of their country. And they're motivated to do so. Our biggest problem in seeing ourselves that we see right now is the retention. And so, as you can imagine, they get some very high-level training. And what we know is we don't quite have the mix right in terms of what the payback in terms of years of service is based on the level of training that you are receiving. Likewise, we're never going to be able to match what's being paid out in the private sector, and we recognize that. But there's still bonus structures for individuals performing different jobs within the military, and we're still realizing that we need to adjust those two to get them as optimal as we can. As I said, I don't know that you're never gonna make up for the money loss of potentially going to the private sector. But what I do think you can strive towards is when they're having that discussion with their family or their friends about, should we stay or should we, whatever I can do to move the money decision as far as close to neutral as I can, I think is a good thing. We're never going to quite get there. But that's our biggest issue and where we're really focusing our efforts in on now. As far as a grade, on the retention part, I think we're a 5. We're probably maybe a little less since I'm going to say this. We're unfortunately still hemorrhaging some high-end talent at a higher rate than we're replacing it, and so we're working really hard to stop that.
Hi, Andres Cangilares. I'm also from the University of Illinois. I'm provost at the University of Illinois now. This is just a comment, not a question. I have to tell you, after your talk today and getting to know you, I feel much better about our cyber command. You brought up an example of a boxer or a martial arts fighter. The way I look at this, the best example you should use about what it takes is think about a fighter pilot, an F-16 fighter pilot. Defense, offense are all together, not only against humans, but against machines as well. So that's the best example. I'm glad you're in that role. Thank you very much for everything you shared with us today.
Well, thank you for those kind words. I appreciate that.
Alberto, can I push you up to my distinguished colleague, Alberto, to some experiences from EDA and what we should do in this space, maybe, or whatever you want to.
Well, first of all, I congratulate you, as many others have done before. It's a fantastic talk. I am Alberto San Giovanni Vincentelli from the University of California at Berkeley, Department of Electrical Engineering and Computer Science. Shankar pointed out to our work in EDA, Electronic Design Automation, and we created an industry that was not there before. But in terms of what is happening in the security business, there has been enormous amount of investment in startups in this domain. I know a little bit of what Israel is doing, and the connection between the defense and the startups that are starting is very tight. And in fact, many people that were working in the defense domain, they go and fund a new startup, but they maintain their content. Yes. So in some sense, that's a way of coping with the hemorrhaging situation that you witness. And I think that we should also raise the bar on the collaboration between the private and the public sector. And there are many different views about this. For example, I was at a NATO conference on cybersecurity 2 years ago, and I gave a keynote there. But there was a position from the German government that private and public should be completely separate, which I find crazy, right? And so I was wondering what we can do about that.
Yeah.
Possibly.
Current events may have...
possibly, no, but their point was that private sector should fend for themselves, and there should be any, support from the government to fight cyber crime, which I think is crazy, because the defense on cyber criminals is the same thing as defending against an attack, in my view.
Yeah.
And so.
No.
If you could comment on this Israeli situation, that's very, very interesting.
Yeah.
In fact, just to build on Alberto's, the universities in Israel are having trouble recruiting people who do that after their military service. But they've actually found that having the startup route actually enables people who've done their tour to then go do a startup and then return to the university. Yes. So it's become a retention tool.
Yes.
And I'm wondering, so I think Alberto's comments about what we can do in that vein in this country is, I think, quite an interesting. So I don't know what your.
No, I appreciate the remarks, and I wasn't there to hear the Germans' position, but the way you described it, I would have a different opinion. The situation or the example that you gave, we actually are very heavily looking at that. You know, how can you potentially maybe go from wearing this uniform into the private sector and come back in a much more seamless way? The other big, not fully tapped into yet by any means, it's a huge resource for us in this regard, is Guard and Reserve. So very many of our Guard and Reserve members are in the private sector doing amazing things and want to continue to serve at the same time. And so we're really, really looking at how to expand that. And I think that's really going to pay a lot of dividends for the nation and back to the private industry and to our ability to defend as well. So I think that's an area that we really need to tap into, and we are.
Hi, I'm Susan Martinez from the University of Illinois. I'm the Vice Chancellor for Research and Innovation. I'm a professor of biochemistry, so that puts me in as one of the non-technical people here. My question is related to the war in Russia right now. What I read in the popular news is there's a lot of amateurs that are trying to hack into the Russian systems. You talked about the team. I'm wondering, are they part of the team? Are they a problem? Do they get in the way? How do you approach that? And how can we help in these areas?
Yeah, so Susan, you asked, I thought the first question I was going to get was going to be about Ukraine. So I was shocked that I might actually leave the stage here and not get a question about Ukraine. So we're seeing a lot of real, if I just look at this, I mean, as an airman, I mean, I'm fascinated by what I'm watching from the lack of air superiority and the troubles that are having, and really looking at root cause, core analysis of why that's going on. We're going to learn a tremendous amount as we continue to really dissect what's been going on. And a lot of that's going on real time. But if I go to the specific to the cyber realm, before I get to your specific question, there's a lot of really interesting things that are happening. Of course, I'm in this difficult position of stuff that's in the open media and stuff that I'm not supposed to talk about. But two big things that I've been really surprised. Number one is that Russia didn't conduct more cyber operations. Not what we expected in that regard. We expected we'd see a lot more. Now there's also, I have reasons to why that may not have occurred, which some of them would be very good, and then some of them would just be things we're going to have to figure out. So that would be the first thing I would share. The second thing that I would share is that, and I touched on it a little bit, what I would refer as information operations, information superiority. I mean, Ukraine's kicking Russia's butt in the information environment, right? I mean, and this isn't a happenstance. It's going to be really interesting to see. It's been very integrated and synchronized, and it seems like it's very well thought out from the heroes of Ukraine, you know, from the guys and gals on Snake Island to the Ghost of Kiev stories and these things that have come out, to President Zelensky making sure he is talking daily, not only to the people of Ukraine, but the people in all of Europe and the globe. The videos that are coming out of Russian soldiers calling home to their moms saying, I thought I was on a training exercise, and the next thing I know, I'm being told to kill Ukrainians. There might be a Geneva Convention type of problem there, but I'm setting that aside for this point. The point is that all of these things are having a tremendous impact in a very asymmetrical, non-traditional way, which touches on some of my comments. The other thing that's really interesting in this space was Susan, what you alluded to, which is this like crowdsourcing into the environment of everything from potential nation-state actors and their organizations, their intelligence organizations or their military organizations, proxies for those nation-states, cyber criminals, vigilantes, you name it. And as you described, they've come rushing into this space. Creates a lot of problems, potentially, right? We have some type of significant operation or even what we label as an attack against a NATO member or against the United States? Who did it? And is it attributable back to Russia or somebody else? And that's always been a difficulty in this space, but the scale in which it expanded very rapidly is something that we're really looking into and analyzing and figuring out how we're going to deal with this as we move forward. So I share your observation and concern about it. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Kostas Panos. I'm with the Department of ECS at UC Berkeley. And I would like to expand a little bit on this question. From an academic institution, many of our colleagues and students are foreign-born. And many come from China, and many come from places that might be adversaries even now or in the future. So how do we benefit from their expertise? And how do we draw a line on how to use that expertise without endangering ourselves?
Well, that's a great, unfortunately, I don't have a good answer for you. I think it's a great question. It is and at the end of the day, it's a policy-driven thing. And, I advise, obviously, and give my best military advice from a policy perspective, but the previous administration and this administration are both looking at this issue, especially as it relates to academic institutions. And it's a difficult problem, right? It's absolutely a difficult problem. How do you take the good and minimize the bad? I don't have a really good answer for that, but I hope that we can figure it out because we don't want to, throw the baby out with the bathwater, as they say. That would be a mistake.
Any other questions?
Hi, my name is Riyad. I'm from KTH in Sweden. And yeah, first I'd like to thank you for your talk and for being here. When I listen to your talk, I hear a lot of reactive solutions. So you assume there's an adversary that's attacking. I'm wondering if you could comment on building systems, defensive systems that are proactively good. So for instance, systems where an adversary would think that it's not valuable to attack. So like you deter it by being so safe that there's no point in attacking it.
No, you're hitting on a very important concept of deterrence within the department. And there's a level of deterrence by an adversary understanding and you promoting not only the security, but the resilience of your networks, right? Do you really want to spend your resource trying to do X because it's not going to succeed? And there's many aspects to that. It's actually demonstrating the technical capability to do what you're saying you're going to do. There's also the information operation aspect of that. How do you communicate that sometimes in very subtle ways to your adversaries to steer them away from those types of operations? So you're exactly right. I just didn't get into it in the talk, but that's something that we absolutely do. Yes, sir. Sorry, I'm looking right to the light there. I'm going to move over here.
Thank you. Thank you for a very nice talk. I'm Carl Johansson, also from KTH in Sweden. Could you comment a little bit about the collaboration? You mentioned Europe and the allies and also the friends, and I hope you regard Sweden as one of the friends. When we left Stockholm a couple of days ago, I think we had 8 US ships in the Stockholm harbor there. But could you comment a little bit about these challenges on collaboration and exchange of information with Sweden and other countries in Europe?
Sure, and I wouldn't say it's limited to Sweden. We've always had this problem in the Department of Defense and whole of nation, which is sharing classified information at the speed of relevance, being concerned about the release of or compromise of sources and methods, legitimate concerns. It's probably never been highlighted more than inside the cyber domain. And I will tell you, this is one of the benefits on the US side of having a commander who's the director of the National Security Agency and the commander of US Cyber Command is the same person. Because the NSA is the largest intelligence organization in the United States, by far. And so many of those intel gain-loss decisions, if we do some type of operation in the cyber domain, or if we share information, what's the risk there, are decisions that he can make, at least in terms of his sphere of influence. And so we found that that's a very beneficial thing. I'll also tell you that I think back to the Ukraine situation, it's demonstrated the absolute need to be able to do this very, very rapidly. And I sense for the first time in my 33-year career that we've kind of hit a turning point in that regard. I really do. I think one of the big lessons that comes out of this, and it really relates back to information superiority, is the ability to share with our friends and allies and to do it quickly. And so I think we may have broken through a wall, if you will, and I fully intend to continue to push those efforts forward so that we can do that with everybody in NATO and our other friends and allies as well. Because I think, once again, this is a collective problem. Collective defense is the best way to attack it. And of course, being on the same sheet of music in terms of information is fundamental. I
want to be sure that we get questions. I hope that the folks here are...
We have maybe a minute or two before the session ends.
Actually,
any final questions?
If there are none, since you're an F-16 pilot, of course, yesterday's New York Times article about how dogfights are back in fashion really prompted me to, a couple of it...
warms my heart, by the way.
There's a recent DARPA program called ACE, ACE, which has been doing robotic F-16, actually, dogfights, not only over the horizon. And so a question to you is, and this, I don't know if Tom's running his own meeting, but one of the debates that Srikanth and I have had is, are we really going to get to a place where man-machine systems, say, integrated with the F-16, and I have some personal stories with the F-15, what is your sense of where that is going? So man-machine systems working together in combat situations at that speed, so. Yeah,
there's several approaches that are going on that are out in open source and open media that I can touch on. But this man-machine teaming thing is very, very important. So part of the program that was mentioned, ACE and others, you imagine you have a guy like me sitting in an F-16, and maybe there's another F-16 over here, but it's not manned. And it's linked to me. So instead of me having a wingman over here that I would be directing and commanding, I'm doing it to that automated aircraft. And you can see that it would greatly expand, especially if you start thinking about 2 ships, 4 ships, mass packages of airplanes and things like that. It can greatly expand what you can do. But I think that's just an iterative step. I mean, I hate to say it, but yes, we're heading towards the point where you will have fully automated systems that are performing what we call today dogfighting against each other. And it's for obvious reasons. As the capabilities mature to the point that you can do that successfully, you take the human limitations out of the loop, whether it's the amount of time that you need to spend in the air or the G-forces, that really limits the performance of airplanes today. 9 Gs is a significant toll on your body. If your head weighs 9 pounds, and the average head does, and then you pull 9 Gs, it's 9 times 9. That's what you're dealing with. And you're, of course, trying to maintain track in a dogfight visually of what you're fighting against. And so you take that completely out of the equation. You also take out all the life support systems that are necessary. So now you're saving weight, which you can do. You can put a lot of more technology and capabilities into the aircraft. So I think that we're heading in that direction. I'm not sure when that will happen. A little bit different, obviously, than automated driving. You're now in 3 dimensions. The other thing is that you have another system out there that's purposefully trying to fool you, right, and confuse you. And that's significantly different, obviously, than what you have maybe in the driving environment.
It's fantastic. Since I have the mic, I'll just say, certainly the 9G is great. In this, I was in DARPA, and in 2000, we had T-33s, but really, trainers engaged with F-15s. And the notion was maybe superior algorithms would help, and it was surprising then that even a trainer could target a test pilot in an F-15. So we are big believers in what the potential of AI is, but as you correctly pointed out, it's a system. I think it's the humans also going to be in it, and so anyhow, when I saw the New York Times article and I saw you were an F-16 pilot, I thought I'd save this question for you.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, General Moore.
Thank you. Appreciate it.